everyone. Welcome to ABA Business Leaders, brought to you by 3Pi Squared. Today with us, we have a really special guest. We have Jennifer Heidt. Jennifer is another connection that we made at the CPABA conference. Thank you.
So many.
Again, Jennifer Fitzpatrick. Jennifer is a BCBA with over a decade of clinical experience across home-based and center-based services, as well as extensive experience in leadership and supervisory roles. Driven by a passion for cultivating the next generation of leaders, Jennifer is dedicated to empowering BCBAs and RBTs through mentorship and training grounded in her own core values: connection, empathy, and service. Her commitment to professional growth and clinical excellence reflects her desire not only to make a lasting impact on the field of ABA, but most importantly on the families and clients she serves. Welcome, Jennifer.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so excited to have you here. So as all of our listeners who've been following along this series, this podcast is part of our How Can We Help series. We've talked to Jennifer about it before, but we had I Hate My Job series, right? Where we were talking about, we scoured the social media, all forms of social media, and came across like the complaints, the hardships of techs and BCBAs in the field. And we really wanted to give them a voice. And so we aired those, and we had reactions on those, and we, talked about those. But we could not end there, right? Like, we really want to, be part of the solution. And so, we said, okay, let's end out this year on how can we help? And so, Stephen and I talk about, that's a lot of what we do here, right? Is like, how can we help? And one of our biggest missions is, contributing to the quality of our ABA field overall, right? And how can we help improve that quality? And then when we went to the conference, it was just lined up so beautifully that we met so many amazing people who also have the same mission, right? And see the problems and see this, the hardships that a lot of, our workers are facing within our field, and also share that same, like I said, the same value of like helping. So we brought Jennifer on today to continue that conversation. And so we're just going to talk about it.
Sounds good.
So Jennifer, what are your thoughts about the field and how techs and BCBAs and their hardships in the field?
Well, it's interesting. I was listening to the last few episodes that you did in the series, and the whole time I had it on, kind of like walking around my house doing whatever. I'm nodding, I'm laughing, I'm shaking my head, and it's like every single point that everyone had, for the most part, is valid.
Yeah.
So what I thought was really interesting was that, which you guys brought up at one point, but regardless of the size of the company they were at or where they were located, you're kind of seeing these same issues, which was interesting. We always kind of want to put it on one or the other, like small agencies or bigger corporations, but it seems like across the board, the field is facing the exact same challenges.
Yeah, totally. So, in your experience and through mentorship and training, what do you offer techs and BCBAs that come to you? Tell me more about that.
Yeah, what I'm really trying to focus on the BT side of things is my full-time job right now. I do work for a larger corporation. So part of what I've been trying to do is kind of bridge the gap between that virtual training and working in home and making it actually practical. So, they're getting some services if they don't have a hands-on training setting that they can go to. So they're getting some experience. But the RBT side, I feel like, is harder than the BCBA side when it comes to mentoring, because they're starting with a blank slate. And if they don't know what they're doing, or a lot of them, this may be their first real job kind of thing, they don't know the field they're getting into, and we're sending them in home to see behaviors they've never seen, clients they've never seen, and they're supposed to act professional and not react to any of that. So I feel like what I try to focus on is being brutally honest to some extent, and really setting them up for every single thing that could happen, the worst of the worst, so that they're, not shocked, and they're actually usually pleasantly surprised or whatever. Just give them a realistic view of what they're getting into and making sure that they really want to commit to the job before they ever step foot in that client's home. And I feel like a lot of times that's what's lacking. BCBAs aren't necessarily talking to BTs before they get assigned to the case. It's not billable time, so depending on their structure, they're not having that conversation. And if they show up at the family's home and just, meet everyone there, I feel like you get that deer in the headlights person that's more likely to quit in a week or two. So I kind of try to get in front of all the problems that I've had as a manager and address that as a mentor.
Definitely. Yeah, in home is a completely different beast, right?
Yeah.
So in clinic settings, you have that
Hmm.
support, or more likely to have that support, right? If you got in a pinch, like somebody can come in and help out, right? But the in home, that's one of the biggest biggest points of concern, right? Is that I'm alone on an island, right? And that was one of the biggest things within our agency, that we really tried a lot of different strategies to help our staff not feel alone, and not only in dealing with behavior and handling the family dynamics in the home, but not having access to peers, and being able to chat about, just being a tech, right?
Yeah.
And having that connection, because connection is important. I whether people recognize it as their value, and or whether they're introverted or extroverted or whatever, like, we're humans, and there's some level of connection that's important, right? And especially when we're working in this type of field where we're helpers. I would have no data on that, but I would bet that there's a high percentage of people that do value that connection, right, within our field. And so if you're just kind of stranded and you're not getting that access, then that can be really difficult.
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, so what strategies? I know that you talked about, like, getting ahead of things before they're even coming in, like the onboarding process too. But what strategies would you recommend to a tech when they get into a situation where they feel alone, or they feel not supported? And that's been the conversation that we've had over the last few guests that have been on over the last few days, as part of the series. Is there's that disconnect, right, too, of, like, can you really go to your supervisor, and say, I don't feel supported, or I need more supervision, or, hey, this behavior, I don't I don't feel comfortable with the strategies, or whatever it is, right? Or even if it's like the drive time between clients is just a little too much, right? Like the traffic is really tricky on that road, right? And so, maybe the sessions are scheduled too close together, but that's been kind of a common theme that we're talking about, like how available are the supervisors, and
And
whether.
also, like, how open are they
Right.
to discussion
Yeah.
on
So
things?
yeah,
Yeah.
so whether they are closed or open, there's still that, going to your superior to have these conversations can be very challenging, especially for someone new in the workforce in general, right? What it doesn't matter where you work for, right? And then we talked about different personalities. Some people are more bold and able to, and then more people are like shy and they're sitting back. I don't know. So you want to speak on that for a little bit?
Yeah, so I really like to explain to RBTs, first of all, what their actual role is versus the BCBA's role and what they're supposed to get from their BCBA. And then also what they're supposed to get from their BCBA supervisors and the company in general, so that they kind of know all their avenues of support that should be in place and who they should feel comfortable asking questions to. But a lot of it is it really encouraging them to actually read policies and know what is supposed to be given to them. I know that's easier said than done because they don't ever usually go through their paperwork, but a lot of times there's some good things in there that the company's supposed to be supporting them on or helping them with, that if they would read through, they could find that. But I think it's getting comfortable asking questions and doing it in a way where you're presenting it with a solution. So I always tell people, like, for example, if you were going to meet with the owner of the company, you don't want to come in and just vent. You're going to come in and say, hey, here's what's going on. I've thought of a few ways we may be able to solve this. What do you think? And they don't even have to be great solutions, but showing that you have actually put thought into this and to problem solve a little bit on your own is going to help that conversation move forward, I think. So for me, it's always, you don't want to be known as the complainer, and there may be a ton of things wrong, but you don't want to be the person that's getting ignored if you're constantly asking for help. So trying to build some rapport from the very beginning in that relationship so that you get to a point where you can ask questions. And the BCBA should be doing that too. They should want that feedback, honestly. They don't always, but the rapport goes both ways. And I think that the RBTs they're on the grounds, they're on the front lines doing the majority of the work day to day. And if we're not open to supporting them and giving them feedback, the client doesn't make progress, turnover increases, all of those things. So it's more of, I think, building rapport, trying to solve the problem on your own, or at least looking like you've put some effort into it. It's a valid complaint. Have your data in line. This happened X number of days. No one answered, whatever. I love a paper trail. If you've been complaining and haven't gotten help, document everything. All of that is helpful.
Yeah, I think it's also good to know, like, for BTs and even BCBAs, like, if you have this issue, probably others in the company also have that same concern. So it's good to bring up, and it's really important. Coming out of this I Hate My Job series, I kind of look at it a little differently, where I was putting all of the responsibility on the owners, but I think I'm taking a step back now and saying, no, hold on. There is some responsibility here of the BTs and the BCBAs to say, this is the line in the sand, and I will not cross it. These are my ethics. I have to follow these, and you can either accept that or find someone else. And I maybe coming from the ground up, we'll get a change where maybe owners. Yeah, I was expecting too much of owners. While I wish that every owner wanted to do this out of the goodness of their heart, maybe I'm mistaken there. You know what I mean? And it has to really be that bottom-up approach. I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree. I think it has to be somewhere in the middle, because I
Yeah.
feel like owners a lot of times either put a lot of trust in the people under them to be doing it correctly, or they don't trust them at all and they're just kind of, somewhere in the middle. But I think a lot of RBTs and BCBAs will take answers to these questions that they know they don't feel good about, and they're like, I don't fully understand what they just said to me. And I'm just speaking from experience, because I know when I started out, I was told a lot of my concerns were answered, and even though I didn't fully think it made sense, I
Right.
didn't question it, because I'm like, well, they own the company, they must know what they're talking about.
Right.
And then you get further into things, and it's like, oh, everyone feels this way. This must be a real issue. But
Right.
people don't talk. You're told, don't talk about pay, don't talk to each other
Right.
about problems, don't cause issues. And then as soon as one person lets their guard down, it's like, oh, wow, the entire team thinks this is a problem. It probably is.
Right.
But I think you take things at face value, and if you don't do your own research and know to question it a little bit more, then you're just going to run with that bad answer or bad decision until you find another job.
Right.
Yeah, that was a lot of it, right? Not like from the social media post, something I already knew beforehand, right? Because just from being in the field for so long. But like job jumpers, right? It's like, okay, jumping to the next one, hoping that they're going to be better. And maybe the interview process and what they had to say, you're like, okay, this is it. This is the right company. And then you really get in there and you're like, this is no different from the last company.
Yeah.
And then maybe you make that other, go to the next place. And then you're like, hey, I've been to quite a few companies now and they're all the same. And so maybe this field's just not what I thought it was going to be. And I'm going to have to get out of here. We had in one of our panels, one of our BCBA owners had mentioned that she no longer holds it against BCBAs or RBTs techs if they have have multiple jobs, because typically when you're hiring and you're looking at someone's resume, if they've been changing jobs very frequently, you're like, yeah, I'm not even going to bother interviewing them.
Yeah.
But she felt strong enough in their culture, within their, you know, their company, that they are different, and, you know, that she'll take on those job hoppers because she recognizes that that's probably the issue. They just haven't been at a place that supports them well enough. I mean, they're
Yeah.
never absolute, right?
course.
But, you know, just in general. And so, yeah, I don't know exactly where I was going with that, but I do, going back to what you said, about, you know, speaking up, and like the techs, it's the responsibilities also on them as well. But I think too, it's in how you present it, right? You know, you can't put my foot down, this is unethical, I'm not doing this, and just, you know, you've been complaining about it and you've been stewing over it for months or whatever, and you finally come in, you're like, I'm going to my supervisor now, and I'm telling them this is no more, you know, like there's a way of doing it, right? You can put that line in the sand. You can say, hey, this is outside of my comfort zone. I don't feel comfortable doing. You know, there are ways that you can communicate that in a more effective way that's going to get you more chances of getting you what you want out of it.
Yeah. And also, just the whole doing your own research and look at what is actually ethical. I know I got to a point when I was managing a center that I was like, if one more person says the word unethical to me without actually knowing what they're talking about, but then you don't want to dismiss people because a lot of times there are these really huge concerns, but sometimes it's just, did you actually look into what you're complaining about? Don't just throw that word around, because that's part of the reason why people don't respond to those complaints too.
Right. Right.
That's
Yeah.
valid.
Yeah.
I really feel like knowing the ethics, right? And being able to come to your supervisor and say, okay, according to 1.08, you know, or, you know, saying, here's the situation. And I feel like this is like 1.08, whatever, you know, this ethic code, or a couple of these ethic codes. Like, I kind of feel like that fits here, you know? Like, what do you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, actually, because that will get them a little bit more comfortable with the code, a little bit more confident in being able to speak up about these things because they have that knowledge and understanding of the code. It's probably a good idea. I think too often, and obvious, right? Like you never heard of ABA on Monday, and now you're in somebody's home on Friday. Yeah, of course you don't know the ethic, right? This isn't going to be a natural thing. I will still get BCBAs sometimes saying, hey, I think I'm going to start a company. My friend, RBT, I'm going to supervise her. She's going to be my partner. And I'm like, whoa. I am not a BCBA, but I know enough about the code that's probably not... You may want to talk to the ABA ethics hotline about how you can navigate that, because I don't think that's going to work. Or like, you know, RBT has got 1,000 of their 1,500 indirect hours, so I'm going to supervise them. They're going to be my partner, you know. So things like that. It's just, or RBT decides they want to open up a company. Okay. But now they're going to get supervised by that BCBA that they hire, and it's like, hold on a second, right? If a BCBA accepts that, we need to talk, right? So I think that, you know, even newer BCBAs don't, I guess, and it may be the company culture, right? That they got their supervision hours in, and they just kind of accept, well, this is the way we do it. And maybe there needs to be more emphasis on going through that ethic and not just going to a CEU and saying, oh yeah, that one, I remember, right? I don't know.
Yeah, I really just think that a lot of times we trust what the person above us says, and we're like, okay, this must be right, and we move on with our day and find out later that that's not the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it reminds me because our child is almost 10, right? And so we're like starting to get into the thick of well, so and so can do it, right? Like, so and so can play Roblox. Well, sorry, in our house we don't play Roblox or whatever, right? You know, like, and explaining to him why too, because it's important for him. And I think a lot of kids, like, it's important to also understand the why behind it. And so we tried to give him like age appropriate information of the why behind things and why we're doing things the way we are. Well, in the same sense, like when I was leading a company, for a long time, I mean, I always had a special spot in my heart, in my, like, for my techs. Like, I really wanted to support techs. I mean, yes, BCBAs, but like really wanted to support my techs. And so I did a lot of things to try to support them. But still, years later, years into it, I realized there was still a lot missing. There were still a lot of things that I wasn't supporting him in the way that I thought I was, or the way I wanted to. And one of the biggest missing pieces was that communication.
Yeah.
I had great communication with them, but like the understanding the why behind why we do things the way we do things. Because their understanding, once we start to have those conversations, I remember one tech specifically, she came to me, she had been with us for years, she was loyal, she was amazing. And she had enough hours to sit for her exam, but she really liked being a tech, and she wasn't quite sure if she was ready to make that next step. And so she was great. But she came to me, and she had a question, and it had something about hours and cancellations and things like that had been like bothering her for a really long time. Like, in the sense of, why are you guys so focused on cancellation rate? Because we got to a point where we had to really dig in and because it was getting out of control. Even though we were trying to support mental health, and we were like supporting, like, hey, if you needed a mental health day, like, no questions asked, please, here's the process to follow. And we were trying to introduce like preventative measures, and anyways, but still, yes, we had like a cancellation campaign going on for both families, and because what happens, right? Because the more our techs cancel, the more families feel like it's okay to cancel, and then you're like in this, like, you're at 30% cancellation rate, and you can't keep the doors open at that for very long. Anyway, so we had this whole conversation, and she was really irritated. She was really, and if she ever listens to this, she'll know that this is her, and I think she'll be okay with me sharing it. But like, she was like, I don't get it. Like, why is this like you? I think she was coming with in her heart of like, I thought you guys weren't like one of those companies that just worried about billables. Like, why is this a switch? What's going on with this switch, right? And so I was able to explain to her appropriately to what she needed to know within the company of like what that looks like behind the scenes, and why we're not focused on billables. We are, centered on the child we're providing services for, but here are all the things, right?
Yeah.
This is the avalanche that happens. Right. And she was like blown away. She was like, I never thought of it that way. She never attached her working her hours to the livelihood of the company.
Right.
Right. Yes, we talked
or
about
the success of the kids.
Well,
right?
I think she knew that. Like, we talked about that of like, like medical necessity. This is why we said that this kid needs 20 hours. And this is why, so we need to do everything that we can to keep him or her at the level that we deemed they need it. Right. So, but I think they got that. But even that, like, they don't realize, like, it's that, you just kind of like little things like that drift, and then you're going down this road and the drift, and then before you know it, you're like not even anywhere close to where your intention was to go. Yeah. And so like really making sure that you're checking back in and you're on that track, and that's where like values can go to play. But anyways, I just say that because it's like that communication piece and that understanding and explaining to the staff why we're doing things, because I do feel like a lot of times in the upper management, it's like hush hush.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the things that's gotten lost as the field gets bigger, companies get bigger, all of those things. Because I used to be the same way, and I loved explaining the business side of it to people because it really did make a difference. Their minds are blown. I'm like, yeah, insurance says they give you this amount for your hours, but I actually can't give you the raise because they really only pay this amount. Yeah. Because here's the session note errors, and here's the delay in this getting done, or whatever it was, And it's like the lights and the non-billable positions and all the other things that they just don't know how that all factors in. So I've always found that people will work harder when you're more transparent to them, and they're, you're on the same team. But I don't think as we get bigger and companies get bigger, there's not people in positions, one, that feel like they can give that information, or two, have the time to do it. So people are not getting that over communication piece that can be really helpful. Well, it's like obviously our main goal is the clients. We want to help
Yeah.
families. That's why we're here. But let's say we were a hospital. Got to be able to bill for everything we do or we can't help anybody. So
Exactly.
that's just kind of how it is, and that's where our field is now. So that's the only way that we get reimbursed. We don't have anyone private paying for services or anything like that. So there's not another option. So at some point, I think BCBAs and RBTs have to see the middle ground of you have to have a billable goal to some extent. There's definitely people overdoing that and taking advantage of it, but there's got to be a balance to keep everybody where they want to be.
Yeah, totally.
Hey, ABA business owners, struggling to navigate the complex world of ABA practice management?
You're not alone. We've been there, and that's why we created the ABA Business Leaders Membership. It's your how-to guide for everything you need to run a successful, ethical ABA practice.
From compliance to culture, from billing to hiring, we've got you covered with in-depth videos and insider advice you'll wish you had years ago.
Absolutely. But guess what? You don't have to figure it out alone. Our ABA Business Leaders Membership isn't just a guide, it's your growth accelerator featuring 34 CEUs to keep you and your team on the cutting edge.
That's right. Plus, you get exclusive access to content you can't find anywhere else. Think webinars, live Q&As, real-life success stories from practices making it happen.
And the community aspect is unbeatable. Imagine being connected to a network of ABA business owners, sharing, learning, and evolving together.
No more second-guessing your business decisions or wondering if there's a better way. With the ABA Business Leaders Membership, clarity, confidence, and continuous learning are what you're signing on for.
So, if you're all in on elevating your ABA practice, join us. It's time your business not just survived, but thrived.
Head on over to 3piesquared.com and check out the ABA Business Leaders Membership. Let's take your practice to the next level together.
It's like there's so many, a lot of these companies that are very compassionate led, very values based, and they're really doing a great job supporting their team. Like they're, and of course, when they're supporting their team, the clients are getting excellent services, right? But it's that the amount of non-billable time that needs to be billed to do that, right? Like training, having these conversations because of these communications, right? Because you can't just be like, hey, come on in, we'll have a conversation, but I'm not going to pay you for it because, I mean, essentially it's part of your job, right? Oh, it's not a billable, so let's, how do you do that, right? And then like these liaison positions, and allowing techs to have some movement and some growth within the company. We've talked to several now who they have some really great opportunities for their techs to, be like liaisons or to be like leads with, amongst all of the techs or,
On the
ethics committee, right? Or the ethics person, right? What a better, like, great position for a tech, like to supplement hours and stuff. But that stuff's not billable, right? And so then we look at our rates and, it's like how, especially the smaller companies who are like startups and they really want to do all these things, but it really, how do you do it, right? Yeah. You got to have the money.
Yeah, somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah, I think attaching a quality goal, that's kind of been my recommendation at this point is, yes, you have billables, and yes, you can kind of incentivize billables as long as it's attached to a quality goal. I think that when there is too much focus on one thing, we get lost, right? And even if it started from a good intention, it can get manipulated. There's that drift, and then all we're focused on is that thing and not the intention behind it. So having a quality goal is what I've been emphasizing people to have. So yeah, you can have a billable goal, and then when they meet their quality goal, then they get they'll get their bonus or their incentive based on that, right? So yeah.
We all take a big breath.
Yeah. the other thing I was thinking about, and when we did our Indeed course, I recommended doing like a day in the life of. I think that, especially for newer techs, right, this is how your day should look. And so when they do get into those situations where they're like, I'm not feeling supported or I'm not feeling comfortable, they can say, well, this doesn't match the day in the life that that you have here, and how can we change that? So I think having that can be helpful too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like knowing the expectation.
Yeah, yeah.
I really like that because you look at TikToks and social media and everything else, and it's like a day in the life, and it's someone complaining. I'm like, that looks like a great setup, actually. So
Yeah.
they just don't know what to expect. And
Yeah.
so I think that can go a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not your normal 9 to 5 job.
No.
I mean, unless maybe you're in the clinic, right?
Right.
And but there's not always the option.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those afternoons and you know,
Yeah.
I mean, and that's one of the things when I would have complaints about that, I would explain like the morning situation, right? Especially in home, right? In home care. And, yeah, I'm like, if you have any suggestions, I am open, right? I am open. If you have a thought or a project of how we could get, more morning clients in, or how we can arrange the schedule to accommodate,
Yeah.
come on in. Let's have a brainstorm session, because that's just unfortunately,
I
that's
think,
part of in-home services.
a lot of times too, just it varies from state to state. And
Yeah.
so they may be hearing someone say, oh, I've got all morning cases. It's great. I'm off, by 5, no evenings. It's like, okay, well, you may live in a state where you're not going to get those little kids because they have great school services and they're actually putting them in school instead of ABA in the morning or whatever it is, or early intervention contracts and all that sort of stuff that kind of plays into whether or not you can get morning cases in some areas.
That is very valid because it does vary across state for sure with those early intervention programs. Absolutely. And I know that was one thing in Virginia they did have early childhood preschools and things like that. And so another part of it is you may be asked to go to a daycare or a preschool to deliver those one-on-one services. And so, that's a different skill set, right? So you may be working at home for a session and then going to a daycare or a preschool to work for a session. And then maybe you do go have a session at the clinic, and so those are all, and I think sometimes we take that for granted and we forget about it, but they're very different skill sets. I mean, there's a lot of overlap too, but those soft skills can look different in how we interact. Mm-hmm.
And to be realistic, it's a chaotic job. It's not your typical, so you do need to know that going into it. You can go from setting to setting, or you're with a little kid, then an older kid, and you've got to switch gears, and that's just kind of how it is.
Well, and that's one thing that we coach business owners on is how to balance caseloads, right? Because I think that can be important as well. Just because a tech or a BCBA has amazing, skill set and ability to work with, let's say, more like high frequency severe behaviors, or they're like amazing at like the little kids and potty training or whatever, right? Like maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that that's all their clients, right? They still need some variety in their day. They need like maybe a little easier, less physically, like a less physical endurance kind of case, maybe one that's a little less mentally exhausting, like being able to kind of play around with that. Is that something that you do?
Yeah, I've done that, and I've also been the one to notice myself like wanting to put the same BT on every really hard case because I'm like, oh, you would do so good, but then I'm watching them at the end of the day just completely burn out and not saying anything. I'm like, okay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to just stack you full of these kids, but you're doing such a great job. So I think you do have to, one, maybe get that person to train up other people in those areas or whatever, but there's got to be a balance, or those great people are going to leave, and that's kind of who you want to stay and become BCBAs and all the things.
Yeah, that was one of the things after watching those TikTok videos, especially. That was really it irked me. Like it was very disappointing. But seeing the passion in the BCBAs and the attacks, and then like there was one where she was like, I've been with 4 companies, and I just maybe this is how the field is. I have to leave." And she was in tears, right? She was obviously passionate about this position, and it's like these are the ones we're losing, right? The well-meaning, ethical one that just want to do the right thing, and their souls are being crushed. It's horrible. And I guess my question is like for companies that are well-meaning, and so many of the companies we work with, the BCBAs are like, I want to do what's best for my clients and my staff, and obviously there is a line there where I can't always satisfy either or, right? There has to be a happy medium. But are there any strategies they can put in place? Maybe they have done some outreach to try and get feedback from their BTs and BCBAs, but they're still not getting they're still not hearing the voices of their staff. Is there something that they can implement? Do you think that maybe they'll get better results, or that feedback they're looking for?
I think so. I think that one, which I think you kind of mentioned this in when you were looking at the TikToks and stuff, but people are scared of retaliation, whether the company says they're not going to or not. And I've worked at a company before where I was the one in charge of sending out the anonymous surveys, knowing full well that they had access to see who it was or something like that. So trying to really put things in place where that's not. If you are telling someone, hey, we want your honest feedback, you want them to believe that that's what you actually want out of that situation, not that there's going to be anything associated with it, regardless of who says it, even if it's not anonymous, that if you need the feedback. And the companies need to get better at one, taking that and not immediately getting defensive and just dismissing the rest of it, but really looking at the feedback because there's always common themes. And so even if you only take the biggest theme away from what everyone's saying, that's going to go a long way in making a difference. If you've got 20 texts with the same exact complaint, that could really mess up your company because it's going to be top down. So I feel like getting better at actually taking the feedback, and then everyone else just getting better at giving the feedback. Even if there is, I know people can't just lose their job and things like that. Everyone needs their paycheck. So there's some of that to it, but I don't know any company that doesn't need RBTs and BCBAs every day. So there's
Yeah.
always going to be another job. If you need to speak up and there's retaliation, that's a much bigger issue, and it's probably best that you do speak up and just let whatever's going to happen happen.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Like, there is such a need for BCBAs and techs, and while like obviously like it can be terrible to lose their job and they need that income, that it would be best for everyone if people could say, okay, this is the line, it's not working, I'm gonna find a place where I don't have to cross that line. And get that mentorship where is my line really the right line, or am I being a little bit like am I drawing my line too quickly?
Right.
And maybe I was listening too much to Facebook, and this really, like you said, isn't unethical. It's like there's a nuance here, and even when you say, "Oh, that's unethical," well, hold on a second. Really, like, can there be things put in place to mitigate any risk of something bad happening, right? And so that we have those checks and balances in place to support that. And the other thing I'll say is like, especially with smaller companies, putting out those anonymous service, like, okay, I'm gonna have one for the techs, and I have 5 techs,
Yeah,
and then I'm
exactly.
gonna put one out for the BCBAs, and I have one BCBA. This is an anonymous
Right.
people, right? Like, and they're gonna know that, right? They're gonna be, obviously, you're asking me BCBA specific questions, and I'm the only BCBA. I can't answer this, right? If you're in that company where you're having to post anonymous satisfaction surveys anyway, right? So I don't know. That can be very difficult. So I don't know if you have any feedback for that, or any ways to get that open environment. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think the better way to do that would be to already have that rapport with your staff and that
Yeah.
open communication, open door policy, so that you're not having to send them a survey to fill out. They know they can come in and say, hey, I've got some questions. I need to know what's going on here. And you're going to walk away from that conversation either in a better place and understanding what's going on, or at least able to make the decision you need to make in your career.
Right.
It's a lot more of just not beating around the bush. It's the same as like sending out an email to, all your employees to address something that happened with one person instead of
Yeah.
being direct. It's like
Yeah.
they're not going to get the message, right? They're going to be like, oh, this isn't about
No.
me. And it's kind of the same thing. You need to be able to talk to your people and give them at least the satisfaction of sitting down and listening to what they have to say, even if you can't give them what they want.
Yeah, and I think I've said this in every podcast that we've recorded, like for like eternity now. But like Brene Brown, she's clear as kind, right?
Yeah.
And so I think a lot of times, even some of us who have the best intentions, myself included, when I was learning, right, is like, oh, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings,
Yeah.
or, oh, I'll give them a little bit more time to see if they're able to. Well, if you don't communicate to them that what they're doing is
Right.
not on track with what you're needing, then how are they gonna, because most of the time they're not doing it because they're like trying to be defiant or trying, it's just that communication of what is the expectation here. And then that goes back to like handbooks and policies and things like that. I know they're a pain. And I know that like it's like, it's like hundreds of pages sometimes, right? But truly they need to reflect the current. I know, like, I was talking with another BCBA last week about like perfection and like what, like the difference between perfection and good enough. And so there's some of that here too.
Sure.
Like we have so much on our plates, especially those of us who are like, the sole the BCBA, and wearing all the hats, right? But keeping the policies and procedures update enough, right? At least the ones that are running on a regular basis, so that they show a clear picture of what the expectation is, because then you could say, oh yeah, well, according to, go back and look at page 40 of the such and such handbook, and that's really how I need you to cancel a session or whatever, right? Yeah. And if you're having questions, let me know. And then because if those are working documents, if those are, manuals, how-tos, right? Or even if you have videos within your employee platform, or, something like that, that could reduce, miscommunication. That could reduce the time that it takes to put action plans in place, or to or losing a staff altogether because it just kind of went off the rails because there just wasn't the basic communication of what that expectation is. Yeah.
I also think that kind of makes the accountability go both ways, which I like. So if I'm saying something wrong and they're like, hey, the handbook actually says this. Oh, yeah, you're right. Let me fix it. That really helps keep everybody in check.
Yes, and then being able to acknowledge when you've made a mistake and owning it and saying, oh, you were absolutely right. No wonder everyone's been doing this. Exactly. I haven't updated it, let's update that. Or, hey, will you help me update that? How can we make this more clear for people to understand? Just like we do our, treatment plans. I mean, I think, a great BCBA tech team, right? The BCBA writes up the program description and trains how to do it, using BST and all of that stuff. But then sometimes, you have to send an update and you're not able to be there right in person. And so here are the steps to the update. And then you come in and you supervise. You're like, oh, you're doing that all wrong. Well, this is how I understood these instructions. Can we go through it together? And then maybe the BCBA is like, oh, absolutely. How could this be stated in a way that could be understood by people who aren't in my brain? Just that. It seems, I know it's so much more difficult and challenging than I'm making it so simple, but at the same time, it's a skill that we could build. It's a skill we could work on.
It's also a level. Oh, sorry. Just
no, go ahead.
Self-awareness too. If everyone on your team is doing a certain thing wrong or a certain intervention wrong, and you're just like, oh, I don't know why they don't get it. You're probably not clear. Your instructions are not clear, or you didn't write it the way you intended it to be carried out, or you haven't modeled it, or there's just something there breaking down, but it's not all 5 techs doing it wrong, more than likely.
Right. I think that's kind of my next question is, so something that we try to do is we take all of our customer feedback, right? Good, bad, or indifferent, and we really try to tell our customers and promote that, and then through our actions show that we want their feedback. But I'll be honest, I don't want their bad feedback, right? Like I don't particularly like it, and it feels bad to get that criticism. But I know, that will improve what we provide. That will improve our services. That will make our customers more satisfied with our stuff. But it's still difficult to take that, and I think that that's a skill that you have to build, right? And I assume for many BCBAs or business owners, when you have so much to do, that defensive and reactive is probably second nature,
Yeah.
right? And so, do you have any suggestions on how to get better at receiving that feedback in a less reactive way, in a more responsive way? Are there any books or classes or just anything?
I always recommend Brene Brown, going
Yeah.
back to Brene Brown, but her Dare to Lead book is really good, and I like that there's a workbook along with it. So I've actually done that with people on my team in a previous job, and everyone that I had below me in like direct trainer or mentoring roles, and even my lead RBTs, we all did that. When getting feedback on a daily basis or having to mentor people, went through that, and I feel like it was really helpful when they realized the entire team is coming at this with a point of vulnerability, and now we're going to be open to all of this. But I think you got to get comfortable being uncomfortable. It's not easy. And so when you want to be defensive or react, you can also walk that back at any point and say, I'm sorry, can we, take a breather, put some time on the schedule, let me think about it for a little bit and come back in a, calmer stance on that too. But then timing is everything in presentation, like we talked about earlier. So you don't just knock on the door, hey, do you have a second? And then throw out all this stuff
Yes.
at 5 p.m. Like, it's
Right.
not going to go well. So how you kind of come across in that delivery of those messages is huge too. But Brene Brown, there's another person, what's it called? Leaders Eat Last is a good book. It has some chapters on feedback that's pretty good. There's a lot of things out now that I feel like are free tools as well. And most of these books have workbooks or anything else that you can find with it, podcasts, a lot of personal development work. I feel like that's what I did because I didn't have anyone with the time to supervise me. So I just dove all into trying to figure out how to do it on my own and happened to get lucky, which may not be the best approach, but it definitely helped me learn a lot of things about myself too.
Absolutely. In our conversation with Meg Solomon, she's like, they do a lot of ACT. I don't know the appropriate way of saying it, but they really incorporate ACT within their day to day. On all levels, and so there's some level of self-awareness that's an expectation of working with them, right? And so I think that it's we had that conversation about, well, how can you expect that from your staff? How can you make them be self-aware as like a job? And she said, well, I mean, if you want to match like our culture and work with us, and if you're not more self-aware and that doesn't match with how you do things, then you're just not a good fit for a company, right? And so they're able to show more vulnerability. They're able to praise each other in specific ways, like, oh, way to be in the moment right now, or things like that. And so I do feel like there is that level of self accountability and that's something that it comes with experience. Like none of us just pop into the workforce. I mean, of course, self-awareness can be great through all stages of life and outside of work. And it's, one would say that you do have to be able to have that level of self-awareness like in your whole life. Like it's not something you can compartmentalize just to one thing, because once you start learning it, it's there and it's just part of who you are. But like, especially, it's not like a college class that they teach. It's not a class in the BCBA guidelines. It's not a class in tech, becoming a tech. Like, these aren't things that you necessarily can expect that an employee is going to land on your, at your doorstep with these skills, so there again, it's like something else that you can embed within the culture of your company, and you can teach these skills, yet they're not billable, but
Right. Right. Yeah, like I think that my thing is, I was probably 38 when I learned that self-aware was even a thing.
Right.
So like this just was not part of my DNA, right? Like, why do you do it that way? You do it that way because you do it that way. Like, that's it. That's it, right? And so I have to assume that there are some BCBAs out there that feel the exact same way. We do it this way because that's the right way to do it. This is how you do it. And so how can we help those BCBA business leaders that do have that kind of, that's just the way it is? How can we build those skills so that they can become more self-aware and they can say, oh, wow, this is my issue, not their issue, right? I am not, like, I'm not teaching this to get the audience buy-in that I need so that my clients can be successful. I see that that's me, and it's not the 15 RBTs that I supervise, right? Like, how do you learn that in a way that can still, I guess, allow your ego to have some self-respect and build that skill, right? Because that's that was a really hard skill for me.
It's like $1 million question.
Yeah, it was like the death to, like, it was really hard to be okay with, wow, that, like, I am not right in this situation. It's hard to accept that and be okay with that and not just ignore it and blame everybody else. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think, we're BCBAs, that should come back to data. What's happening every day, and how many times do you have to have the same situation happen over and over before you just accept that you have to change something to make it better, or talk to the people that can change it? Because we're not taught that in school, right? We all go to school for psychology education, something related, and learn how to be a BCBA to work with kids. We don't know how to manage people. We're not getting business degrees and things like that. So that first couple of years in leadership, you're just kind of flying by the seat of your pants, trying to figure out how to even manage, much less make changes and do it in a positive way. But I think that it's got to go back to, how long are you willing to let things be bad before you actually just accept that you could be the solve to the problem? So looking at, are your clients making progress? Are you getting the same parent complaints over and over? What are your staff complaining about? What do you feel like you're having to say over and over? For me, it's, if I'm repeating the same thing, obviously I'm not being clear.
Right.
And that frustrates me. Nobody wants to have the same conversation a million times. So I think once you hit that breaking point of, okay, just tell me what's wrong, like what's going on, then we can actually get somewhere.
Right. Yeah, there was, when we did our values, because we redid 3 Pi Squares values, and April was walking me through one of those things to do. And I was like, it's way easier for me to say what I hate, right? What I absolutely hate. And then maybe we can then discuss what it is that I want to see, right? And then when we went to CPABA, I don't remember who it was, but that was one of the things that he mentioned, right? Like, if you're really struggling with what you want to see on the day-to-day basis, maybe you start with what you absolutely do not want to see, right? I do not want half of my sessions being canceled. I do not want to get 15 calls for the same issue from parents. I do not want everybody coming to me saying that they don't have enough supervision, or whatever it may be. And then you kind of take the opposite of that and say, okay, that must be a value, and how do we incorporate that into the company? I don't know if that...
I believe it was Martin.
Martin?
Yeah, Martin Myers. He's
Okay.
actually going to be on the podcast.
Oh, is he? Okay,
yeah,
cool.
yeah, totally. It's that whole, like, 'cause values can be really hard to identify, and especially, like, and we even have it within one of our courses. I don't think it's up live right now, but, like, where you have, like, like all the not all, but maybe like 50 value words is there, and it's something we use with our agency and with our staff, and, like, then you can, like, put them in order.
Like, what's important?
I'm sorry, no. Like, that was like my ADHD is like, okay, number 1, I can't prioritize. Number 2, I would, like, overanalyze, okay, what does this word mean? What does loyal mean? What exactly do you mean by loyal? And, like, how, and then you start to, discussing, like, well, loyal to me is this and loyal to me is that. Well, that's not, So yeah, I think that's one of the easiest things is, like, to say, okay, what is it that is happening that I don't like that's happening. Okay. And then like defining that behavior and then saying, okay, what's that replacement behavior, right? Like looking at the functions of it, like all the pieces. That's kind of what I took you through, even though I didn't use those words. But yeah, it's like, well, what are you wanting to get out of that? You know, what is it? Why are you doing this thing? Or when this happens, what is it that you're doing? Okay, well, what are you wanting from that you're, you know, and just kind of like working it backwards, because, you know, values can be like, you know, let's get real. Like they're like this fluffy word that everyone's throwing around these days, and values-based, treatment and values-based leadership and values-based, but like, what does it really mean, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I actually just went through a course it's designed to help you like figure out your target audience kind of thing if you're going to teach something. But basically they have you work through the pain points of the people that you serve, and then like you're just saying, work it backwards. So it's like, and what is your skill set, and then what is your sweet spot kind of in the middle of that, and that's how you can help people. And I thought that was a really cool approach to that too.
That was really cool. I like that. There again, it like, I don't know, it's like takes out that, all of these strategies that we're talking about, take out that like your side, my side, like it's very much a team approach of we all have some responsibility in this.
Right. Yeah. I think if you can drop the ego and like you mentioned, have a little bit of vulnerability, right? Like just say like, yeah, this sucks, man. I don't like being here. But if you don't go there, nothing is going to change, and nothing can improve if you're not open to that. And it can be really hard to be open to that criticism, or at least the idea that it is criticism, where it may not necessarily be on you. It's just, man, I would like to see this change because I could do a better job, right? And it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with they're just really passionate about this field, and they want to do the best that they can possibly do, and maybe things can get a little bit better.
Yeah, I feel like when I was listening to the episode with all the TikToks that you guys were reviewing, it's like I've been saying this a lot lately, that I feel like there's not passionate, committed people. They're just signing up for the job. And then I'm listening to this, I'm like, oh, well, that I need to take a step back, because that's clearly not the case. It's just that we have made everyone so defensive or so like guarded with all of these things that keep coming up as recurring issues for them. They're, you know, job hopping, whatever it is. And it's almost like we've created this culture more than anything, which was a little shocking when you listen to it all put together like that. I'm like, this is not a generational work ethic issue at all. It's actually, we've created all these problems.
Yes, exactly. Because we didn't even pick these out. We had our virtual assistant who doesn't even get ABA. We had a couple of different virtual assistants and just randomly go through and pick them out. And I was the same thing. I was kind of shocked too. I was like, wow. But I think that, you know, we're so easy to blame. It's like, oh, it's all PE companies, or, oh, those small companies, they don't really know what they're doing. Or, you know, it's like, oh, nobody has a work ethic anymore, you know. It's just, it's easy. But I think like where you're saying like ego, I mean, like, come on, people, just like set your ego aside. Like, it's so easy, right?
Yeah,
but I mean, that's where ego is, right? Is that's where it's stubborn. It's like when you start to blame, when you're blaming. So maybe that would even be something, right? Like you said, if you're repeating yourself often, okay, well, maybe even a first step of, you know, and the first step of being like self-aware is just recognizing it. You don't have to change a thing. It's just like that. And then practicing that pause of like, okay, that happened. And sometimes when you're trying to, you know, I guess change your own behavior or be more aware of a behavior that internal within yourself, like you may not even be able to notice it right when it happened. It may be the next day and you're like, oh, I did that thing. And then for me in my own personal journey, when that like time starts to decrease and I'm able to actually notice it in the moment as it's coming out of my mouth, or I'm performing the action, like, oh, I'm doing that thing. I still might not be able to like shift that gear yet, right? But it's like the sooner, quicker I can recognize and acknowledge, oh, that thing's here, I'm doing that thing, whatever. Then I can say, okay, practice that pause and okay, and then whatever plan I have set in place, because then it's also important to have that replacement behavior for yourself to know what to put in that place, or you're just going to be like, I don't know what to do. But I think it's like if you're placing blame on somebody, And I know my
Including
personal,
yourself.
in my personal, like,
Including
Steven's
yourself.
like, including my personal life, it's like, yeah, because, and that's a hard time. I think sometimes it's hard to recognize when we're blaming ourselves too. But that's typically when defensive shows up. So if we're either blaming someone else, or we're like being very defensive, and some people may be able to be more aware of when they're blaming themselves as well, right? But I think all of those things are great red flags or great I don't want to call them red flags. They're not negative. It's just part of human. It's just who we are. It's just like it's here sign, right? Of like, okay, well, let's pause and see, like, oh, that's happened a lot this week, right?
And I think that the pause in itself is huge. You don't have to immediately respond to things. So if you're like, okay, I appreciate you presenting that information. I do want to talk about this, but we need to, take a minute or whatever. You don't have to immediately respond, because that's when you're going to just ramble and be defensive and react.
Yes, 100%. Well, I was thinking back to Brene Brown. I think it might be in her Dare to Lead book, or it may have just been on her podcast. I've read all her books and listened to every podcast she's on, but she was talking about how one of her, here she is, like queen of vulnerability and, open communication with her staff and everything like that. And they have like an open feedback policy, all this stuff. And one of her staff came into her office and, gave her feedback or said something that like completely like triggered her, right? And she just wanted to rant and rave and go off. And so instead, they have some code word or phrase they use within their, within their company. And so she said that thing, like basically saying, I need a pause. I gotta process this. I know if I react right now, it's not going to be healthy or kind or whatever. Right. And so then she like went and she like did laps in the parking lot, because I guess that's one of the things that she does, like when she's in that spot. Right. And then she was able to come back, say, okay, this is how I feel. I'm ready now, though, to listen to what you have to say, and I'm, whatever, right? But I think that's we're more, and I don't want to be part of the problem by like overgeneralizing everybody, but that is the tendency, right? Is to just react and not, because we're also in the hurry culture, right? Hurry, and sometimes like, if it's in the moment. Sometimes we do have to respond. Sometimes we feel like there is an answer that needs to happen, but it can be, hey, I don't know. Let's, especially like I'm thinking about in a supervisor BT kind of role, like if it's in the moment with a parent or a kid, even in that, like, I'm not sure if this is the right thing, but let's try this. Yeah. Like this is the best idea I have at this moment, because nobody knows the 100% right answer all the time.
Exactly. And getting comfortable being honest about that too. Like you said, if you don't know, say you don't know. Don't tell that family, here's what we're doing. Like you can say, I need some time to figure this out. Yeah. And it's going back to that, this is just how we've always done it thing. If that's your answer, then we got to look a little bit deeper, because if it's not working, who do we need to reach out to or look up or research or whatever to find some different answers?
Right, 100%, 100%. Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know every answer, but I can find every answer, right? Like I think that really it's okay to not know, and now it's your job to try and figure it out with the resources that are available to you.
But it's still, you still might not be the right answer. It might take multiple trials, Yeah. And I was having had a conversation with, I think I already mentioned it in here, but like about perfectionism, right? And then I had a follow up with someone else. You'll probably hear it on a few podcasts like that, like kind of coming in and out of some of the podcasts, because it's something that's like really thinking in the back of my mind. Because it's not just ABAs, ABA field. It's not just BCBAs that like have that perfectionism. It's across the board, but I really see it in our field. And I'm just gonna say, like, that BCBA God complex that we talk about, right? But part of that comes that responsibility that they feel of like perfectionism, right? And even within like treatment plans, and because it's important that we do everything to the best of our ability, and that we follow the research, and that we're manipulating. Maybe manipulating isn't the right political word to use, but we are, dealing with people's behaviors, right? And we have that. That's why we have ethics in place, and because we have skills that, if we're not using them in the correct way, can cause some unethical issues, right? but also we're looking at the accuracy, and it's like looking at our kids' treatment plans. 95% accuracy across 3 occasions for 2. Like,
Yeah.
let's be real. Like, let's be real within our treatment plans for our individuals that we're providing services for.
Yeah.
And let's be real with ourselves. Like, it's like, I feel like our culture within the ABA world is such that mistakes are not allowed. Mistakes are bad, and so, yeah, I just want to start talking about that more, because I feel like the more we talk about it, the more aware we can be of it, the more open that people will be to have these conversations. But yeah, I think that's like kind of all in the same, that ego and that perfectionism and that not being able to say, I don't know, or, hey, let's work together and figure this out.
Yeah, and I think that's our background makes us super hard on ourselves.
Yes.
Because if we're in the business of changing behavior and we can't change our own, that's a lot to kind of have on your conscience.
Yes.
Like the perfectionism piece, it just, we don't know any other way sometimes. And it's like, okay, I can stare at this treatment plan for my entire week, or I can just get it done. Like, what's what's going to make it the biggest difference? And then being realistic too, like you have BCBAs that will put that a 4-year-old's goal is to have 0 crying for 20 days. And it's like, no, that's not going to happen. So just getting realistic about what, human nature. We wouldn't, if any of our friends did the things that we are trying to be so hard on ourselves for, or family members, it would be no big deal at all. We wouldn't think twice about it. It's just, I feel like our brains and our background and all the science and all the data, we feel like we should be able to change anything, and that sets us up to fail.
Yes. I think we have all been in a situation where a parent comes to us and was like, okay, this thing's going on with my kid. And you're like, oh, I do that thing, or, is that a problem? Do I do it around you? Because I had a family who, like, the child hummed, and it really bothered the mom when the child hummed, and I'm a hummer, and so, like, when the mom brought this up to me, and I was like, did I hum? Like, it's like there's social validity, and then there's like real, like there's like some real inner stuff going on too. So yeah,
and that's where we get the criticism of, we're turning out, we're robotic or whatever. It's like we're doing it too sometimes.
Yeah. And so I just love this, emphasis on compassionate care. Some of us that have been in the field for decades are like, what do you mean this compassionate care? Because this is how we've always practiced. I've had conversations with a lot of BCBAs, like, I don't get this whole like new ABA and compassionate care because this is how I always practiced it. But those are like the gyms in the field, right? That's not as a whole how it necessarily goes. Yeah. So, but I love that we are all having more conversations about this, and that we're all focusing on this, and things are shifting more in that direction. But I would like to put it out there. I think, how can we help starts with us, and allowing mistakes. It's so much easier said than done. But maybe start just having those conversations with each other of like, oh, I made a mistake. I did this thing. I don't know, right? Being able to, even amongst our peers, maybe other business owners, other BCBAs, other techs, and being able to have these conversations of like vulnerability and realness, and we're human. We're all very much human.
And we're giving that feedback to our BCBAs, BTs, and everything else, but we have to model that from the leadership standpoint down too.
100%. You definitely have to. That was something that you had said earlier. Glad you went back to that, is that modeling it. That's the best thing that we can do. So it starts with us, right? As leaders. So we have that responsibility to show up for ourselves, so we can show up for our staff and our people. Well, we can obviously talk for hours.
And I want, before we end, I do have one more question for both of you. So we talked about taking feedback, but I think it's also just as important as we've all. It goes both ways. So are there any practices, courses, where do people start? if they're a BT or a BCBA, and this is not a skill in their wheelhouse, how do they start feeling more confident in themselves so that they can give that feedback? I know, we've said don't just rush in at 5 o'clock and think it's like a confession, but like how do we start to learn that skill so that we can provide that feedback so our clients do get the care that we all know they deserve?
Yeah, I don't know if there's a lot of really good courses kind of at the BT level for that, but one thing that I really like to have BTs and even BCBAs do is role play that. So I'll do that kind of in my sessions as far as mentoring or even supervision with them. And have them role play giving feedback. I'll respond the wrong way, the right way, ask questions, whatever it is, and kind of get them comfortable just having the conversation. I think that can go a long way. And I think if you don't have someone within your company that's kind of pouring into you in that way that has the time to do that, get together with the other BTs and say, hey, I know we're all kind of complaining about the same stuff. Does anybody want to just go get coffee and kind of talk through how we might discuss this? But I think that you're going to be a little bit more honest with your peers, and they could easily be like, oh yeah, that came across as a little condescending or whatever it is, and kind of fine tune that and give each other some tips, and that can go a long way. The more confident we all are, the better it's going to be when you're delivering the message.
Yeah, I love that idea. There's also a book, Nonviolent Communication by Marshall Rosenberg. He's got a couple of books. One's more like a workbook. And there he has scripts and things in there too of like little of components, like a formula, if you will, that you could use. And like there's some scripts. It's I think the book Nonviolent Communication, a lot of the examples and stuff in there are personal, more like for your personal life, but they do have a couple of business ones in there. And I believe, yeah, you could generalize it. I believe the second book, I can't remember, I have it in my office, but the second book I think has a few more like professional. But yeah, but you could look up Marshall Rosenberg and Nonviolent Communication, and there are a lot of communities that have also applied his work within their specific areas. So it does provide. So, but I love that like role play, and I think that wouldn't it be so cool to work with a group of people that could go out and have a cup of coffee together to problem solve and work together, and how we're going to communicate this issue that's going on? That would be so cool.
Yeah. I think one thing, because when we're coaching someone through rate negotiation, one of the things that I always mention is, okay, we can't, while we're focusing on money, obviously, our focus in this letter and our intention behind the letter really cannot be, I need more money, give me more money. It needs to be, I need to provide quality services. I need to be able to provide high quality training for my staff, and that is why I need a rate increase. And I wonder if maybe BTs, BCBAs, and business owners listening to this can all say, I need to provide the highest quality services for my client, and that is why I am bringing this up in this moment. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with I need to provide the highest quality services I can possibly provide. And maybe coming from that perspective, maybe you can come up with that role play where, okay, yeah, I don't want this to come off condescending because, again, I want to be able to communicate this appropriately so that I can provide the highest quality services. You know what I mean?
And that's the goal for all of us, right? That's why we're here. So we should be able to lead with that.
Yeah.
I think that's a great ending point.
All right, peace out.
But I do want to say, Jennifer, is there anything that we didn't cover, or anything you didn't get a chance to talk about that you were hoping to be able to have a platform to talk about today?
Not really. I did want to bring up one thing I'm working on right now is actually, I keep hearing the recurring theme of a wait list and families and doing assessments without having people lined up and all of that. And one of the things that I am trying to put together at the moment is some consulting kind of courses, resources for families that have gotten the diagnosis and are stuck somewhere in the middle of that long, long wait list for services. I'm hoping that it's going to launch next year, but
Cool.
kind of in the early steps of that. But very, very excited really to kind of get back. I love working with staff, obviously, that's my main job, but I'm kind of missing the family connection piece and just making sure that I'm hitting all levels of that too. So that's kind of where I'm seeing the biggest need right now for parents, and hoping that we can give them some tools out of the gate before they even get started, so that they also know what they should be getting and what to expect too.
Oh, that's
Love
beautiful.
that. Yeah,
I love
we
that.
need to talk.
We
Yeah,
will
'cause-
be talking to you.
because
Yes.
this is something that is coming. We're also crossing that and figuring out how we can do that. So maybe we can collaborate in some way, because I think that there's a couple other BCBAs that we're working with that are feeling the same thing, is how can we support these families that are on the wait list that may, I mean, some people are on wait lists for years, right? And because there are evenings, and we're all top heavy and we can't provide enough staff for evenings. So I think, that's awesome. Cool.
Oh, that's so exciting to hear.
Yeah.
Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for your time today and for sharing your expertise. And we really appreciate it. It was a fun
Yeah,
conversation.
that's great.
Yeah.
And so thank you.
Thank you. It was great. I appreciate being here.